welcome back to Is This a Great Game or What? With the Hall of Famer, my dad, Tim Quirkjian. I am Jeff Quirkjian, and today is the 51st anniversary of Hank Aaron's 715th home run. And it's wildly important because our guest, Dad, has a massive connection to that home run.
Right. Tom House is our guest today. Tom, of course, is a former major league pitcher, former major league pitching coach. I think he knows more about the throwing of a baseball or any object than any person I've ever met. And he caught Hank Aaron's 715th home run in the bullpen in left center field in Atlanta. And Jeff, you know how you remember where you were for really important things, usually tragic things, but I remember exactly where I was when Hank Aaron hit that home run. I'm sitting in the rec room at Stoneham Road. Andy, Matt, Mom, and Dad. It was so great. And he did it. He did it almost on command. And it was so cool, which is so typical of Hank Aaron because he was such a great player. Here's how revered Hank Aaron was in his career. 2014 All-Star Game. Aaron Boone and I, now the manager of the Yankees, covered the All-Star Game for ESPN. He was my teammate for years. So he gets off the elevator, and we're at the All-Star Game. And Boone, you know him, Jeff. He can talk to anybody about anything. He grew up in a major league ballpark, and he gets off the elevator, and he's got this shocked look on his face, and he goes like this. You know who was in the elevator with me? You're not going to believe it. I said, who? He said, Hank Aaron. Wow. I said, oh, great. What did you say to him? He goes, I was too afraid to speak. I couldn't speak. I said,
my
what?
gosh.
It's the first time in your life you've been speechless. How could that happen? And he went like this. Well, it's Hank Aaron. And that's how revered Hank Aaron was to Aaron Boone and to so many others. And Craig Counsell, who is now the manager of the Cubs, used to be the manager of the Brewers. That's the team for which Hank Aaron finished his career. And of course, Craig Counsell is a Milwaukee guy, and he used to work for the Brewers in another capacity before he became the manager. And they had like a seminar up on stage, and Hank Aaron was up on stage talking to people who were on, in the crowd. So Hank Aaron calls Craig Counsell up to go up on stage and be interviewed by Hank Aaron. And Craig Counsell told me later, he goes, no, I can't do this. I can't do that. That's Hank Aaron. That's baseball royalty at its finest. So he says, I get up there finally, and Hank Aaron is interviewing me. Like, how did a Milwaukee kid end up in the major leagues? And Craig Counsell, who is wicked smart, Jeff, and never is at a loss for words, he said, I didn't even know what to say. I didn't even know what to do because I realized I was being interviewed by Hank Aaron, which is so great.
It's unbelievable. And Dad, you shared a very important memory you had with Hank Aaron during our interview with Tom House. Plus, I want to point to one thing that really impacted me that I want you to be listening for in our interview. And that was not only the moment where he ran from the bullpen in the outfield with the ball to go give it to Hank Aaron, breaking Babe Ruth's record, but his recollection of the hug shared between Hank Aaron and his mother. Listen, we're a family show. That's what this show is all about, Dad. That's what we do here on this show is right. The love of family. And his chills, tears, it was so powerful. I can't believe you were able to get Tom House on this day, and it landed on a Tuesday. It's so perfect, Dad. I don't want to give anything else away, but how spectacular is that? I can't wait for people to hear it. Should we dive in, though, to our takeaways? I don't want to give anything else away from Tom House.
Yes, of course. So, Jeff, I did a radio game on Saturday from Minneapolis, the Astros and the Twins, and I had the best time. In the opener of that series, Jose Altuve, one of the great hitters in the game today, a future Hall of Famer, struck out 5 times. He went 0 for 5 with 5 strikeouts. And it's the first time he's ever struck out 5 times in a game. So I interviewed him before the Saturday game, and I asked him about that. I said, were you able to sleep at all after that game? Because he's such a prideful little guy. So he said, I woke up in the middle of the night and I went, what happened? I can't believe what happened. And he said, it took me 14 years in the league to strike out 5 times in a game. So hopefully it'll take me another 14 years before I strike out 5 times again. And the other beauty, Jeff, is that first off, Jose Altuve is shorter than you. He's in between you and me in height, meaning you're taller than a future Hall of Fame second baseman. So the best part of the game was he is facing Bailey Ober, who is 6'9", who currently is the tallest player in the game. And Jose Altuve at 5'6" is the shortest player in the game. So the first at bat of the game featured the tallest player in the game against the shortest player in the game. And Bailey Ober's extension, because he's so tall, is the longest extension that there is in the game because he's so big, his stride is so long. And what Altuve always does, he stands further up in the box than any hitter. Most hitters, Jeff, you see are in the back of the box. They're right foot, right-hand hitters, right at the back line of the batter's box. He's all the way up the front because that's where he's most comfortable hitting. And he's doing that against a guy who's 6'9". And of course, second pitch of the game, Jose Altuve hit a home run.
Wow.
So 2 pitches after he just struck out 5 times, he said, all right, I got to end this thing. I got to end it right here. And of course he did with a home run. It was just beautiful.
And we talk about this all the time, Dad. Like, when does LeBron James go, 1 for 14 from the field, 7 points? It just doesn't happen.
Never.
It just doesn't happen. It's a different game. So for him to wake up in a sweat and then come back 2 pitches into the next game, boom, hit a home run. It's just next level. Next level.
He is next level. I just hope people understand, because I told you, Jeff, that Alex Bregman once told me that Jose Altuve is the greatest athlete in the major leagues, and that includes Shohei Ohtani. Now, this is Alex Bregman saying this, not me. He said, pound for pound, he's the strongest guy on our team. He's the fastest guy on our team. He can jump higher than anybody on our team. It's unbelievable what a great athlete Jose Altuve is. This was last year he was explaining this. So it's no surprise that he's this good of a baseball player at this size because of his athleticism and his amazing skill.
We'll have to put Mookie Betts and Jose Altuve
right
against each other, because Jerry Harrison Jr. last year said Mookie Betts is the best athlete in the game. Right. So I'd love to see that matchup.
Mookie could play slot back in the NFL right now. It would be a point guard for the Lakers if he decided to play basketball. We'll see. All right. So that day, Jeff, it was 38 degrees in Minneapolis. And I'm always fascinated what players do to try to stay warm in freezing cold weather, because there's a lot of standing around for a baseball player. So Harrison Bader of the Twins, a very funny guy and a really smart guy. So I said, what do you do to stay warm on a day like this? And he said, I take liniment before the game and I rub it all over my body. And then I take baby oil and I rub it all over my body. And then I put layers on, and that's how I stay warm. I must tell you, Jeff, I should have known this, but I'd never heard that before. And then I asked Joe Espada, the manager of the Astros, how did you used to stay warm on a day like this? And he said, well, I just took baby oil and rubbed it all over my body. So 2 guys in one day told me the same thing, that that's what they would do to try to stay warm.
Well, Dad, you are the coldest man I've ever met in my entire life. In fact, when we were doing this episode virtually, but commonly we do it together, I bought a small little heater to put in the basement studio so your feet can stay warm. But I don't think with the amount of hair that you and I have, on our chest and the rest of our body. I don't think the baby oil is going to, it's going to end up gelling over. It's not going to work for us.
Yeah, I have a circulatory issue of some kind. I'm always cold. I'm not apologizing for it. That's just the way it is. Okay, the big news of Monday, of course, was that Vlad Guerrero Jr. signed a 14-year, $500 million deal with the Toronto Blue Jays. Okay, Jeff, he just turned 26 years old. He's got 160 homers already. He is one of the best young hitters, one of the best hitters in the game. And this was something that had to be done by the Blue Jays. I was told today by someone I talked to, the entire country is obsessed with the Blue Jays signing Vlad Guerrero Jr. Like they didn't have a choice. And I think they overpaid to get him. And there's no telling if he's going to, let his weight go. Maybe not. He cares and he tries. He really cares about winning and about being a great player. But, does he have a killer instinct? And is he going to really be as good a defensive player as he can going down the road here 14 years? I think it was something that the Blue Jays had to do. And now I think they have set their course that we've got this guy with us for the next 14 years.
And, on Saturday, I'm actually going to see him playing at Camden Yards against the Orioles because I'm going to a bachelor party for my buddy Joey, who gets married in May. We're going to try to do the 999 challenge.
All right. Explain that one more time.
9
beers.
beers.
I'm the last guy that will be taking part in anything like this.
Maybe amongst like 2 people each. 9 beers, 9 hot dogs, 9 innings.
There is no way that anyone in your group, not even Joey, is going to be capable of doing that.
If anybody could do it, my buddy Joey would have a chance. 6'6", former tight end, former center on the basketball team, heck of an athlete, heck of a stomach, I might add. Now, the question is, though, Dad, do you think Vlad Guerrero Jr. could do the 999 challenge? He's a big guy.
Yeah, if he had to, I'm sure that he could. I would have much better chance of eating 9 hot dogs than drinking 9 beers. Because if I had 9 beers, that might be the official end of me, Jeff. So
for you, something more accurate as a 999 challenge. Could you do 9 avocados, 9 Diet Mountain Dews in 9 innings?
I could do 9 Diet Mountain Dews in 9 innings because trust me, Jeff, I've done it before. In fact, when I went to Minneapolis the other day, it's been a while since I've been there. Diet Mountain Dew fountain drink in the press room. How about that? So Detroit and Toronto, as far as I know, are the only 2 that have Diet Mountain Dew on tap fountain drink in the press room.
What Quirkjians do you have? I know we're doing them half week, so do you have any from really the weekend?
Jeff, always have them, but they're harder to find now because I only have limited days. I don't have a whole week to look them up. Not the point. So I told you Jose Altuve struck out 5 times in a game. So Jackson Churrio's already done that. Dylan Cruz of the Nationals done it, and now Altuve. So we had 3 guys do it in the first basically 10 days of the season. Only one other season in Major League history, 2023, had there been 3 guys strike out 5 times or more in a game before we got to the month of May. So that's the only other month. And we've got many, many more days in the month of April to get a 4th and a 5th because there were 5 guys that did it in 2023. Just another reminder, Jeff, that the strikeout rate is way out of control. And it's in part because, and I'm going to take the high road as always here, Jeff, the pitching that we see today, the stuff we see today is absurdly good. And your team, the Phillies, tied the 2020 Reds as the only teams in Major League history where their pitchers struck out 10 or more batters in each of the first 7 games of a season. And then it ended against the Dodgers when they only struck out 3 Dodgers in one game after tying the Major League record with 7 straight to start a season with at least 10 strikeouts. we had our first triple play of the year. The Rockies turned it. It was a 5-4-3 grounded into triple play, which I was explaining last week. Grounded in a double play is different than a line out into a double play or a fly out into a double play. So yes, Jacob Wilson of the A's, good-looking young shortstop, grounded into a triple play. And then later in the game, he knocked in 2 runs. So I checked with Frank at the Elias. The last time a player grounded into a triple play and then drove in at least 2 runs in the same game was Kurt Suzuki for the A's in 2010. So last one, Jeff. And again, I just want to see. You know that every day I look at the box scores and I always look at the starting pitchers because there's no telling what pitching matchup you might see. I told you, we had Ivan Nova against, Matt Cain. So we had the Nova Cain matchup. We recently had John Gray against your boy, Aaron Nola. So that we had the Granola matchup. Okay. So we had one here on the Monday night games. And, I was just wondering if you took a look at them and if you saw anything interesting, because I saw it's a stretch, Jeff. It's a major stretch. Most of these pitching matchups are stretches, but I just want to know if you saw anything out of the starting pitching matchups, which I have implored you to look at every day.
You have forever tainted my ability to look at box scores simply for statistics any longer.
Right.
I used to love to watch how many hits and home runs and errors and walks people
Jeff,
get.
you can still do that. I'm just saying there's some quirky things, hence the Quirkjians, that you can find in box scores.
The Los Angeles Dodgers travel to play in Washington, D.C. against the Nationals, where Mackenzie Gore of the Nationals will pitch against Dustin May of the Dodgers, the gourmet matchup.
Jeff, I have never been so proud of you in my life. Day you got married, I was proud. The day you had McKinley Hope, I was really proud. But I tend to exaggerate. I'm not exaggerating here, Jeff. This is as proud as I've ever been of you, that you would look at those pitching matchups and come up with gourmet. Of course, it's the most pointless thing ever, but that's the point of the Quirkjians. You did it. Way to go.
Yeah, serving up a real gourmet matchup here. Throwing meatballs.
Jeff, I've told you many times, don't grow up and be like Pop-Pop. You could be better than Pop-Pop, but that was good, Jeff. You found it, and I'm proud of you for doing that.
Thank you, Dad. On this date in baseball history, we addressed it at the front, of course, 51 years ago, Hank Aaron hit home run 715, making him the home run king at the time, passing Babe Ruth, of course. So is that part of On This Date? Because we talk about it a lot with Tom House.
Right. Well, that's the theme of the entire show. So we're not going to go through that. But we are going to tell you that Will Clark, borderline Hall of Famer, not a Hall of Famer, but borderline close. The first swing he ever took in the major leagues on this date in 1986, he had a home run off of Nolan Ryan, which for a young guy, he's facing one of the greatest power pitcher of all time. And the first swing he ever takes is a home run. So, Jeff, you don't remember Will Clark. You're too young, but he had this amazing swing. And he had this tremendous finish to it. And it looked like with his swing that he was opening a cape. And that was the way people described his swing. So Will Clark, when he was at Mississippi State, used the word cape as a verb. So after he would hit a home run off somebody, he would stare at a teammate and go, "I caped that guy just now. I caped him," because he opened up the cape and hit a home run. 89 playoffs, Jeff, in San Francisco, Candlestick Park, freezing cold. I'm sitting outdoors, upper deck. And they're playing the Giants. The Giants are playing the Cubs, and Mitch Williams is pitching for the Cubs. And it's a big, big spot. And they bring Mitch Williams in, and Kevin Mitchell, who's on deck, looks at Will Clark and says, "You know what you got to do here," meaning you got to get a hit here. And Will Clark just looked at Kevin Mitchell and said, "It's done." And then he walked up and hit a line drive single up the middle, and they won the game. That's who Will Clark was.
That's
He was pretty
incredible.
darn good, Jeff. Also on this date in 1993, Carlos Baerga of the Indians, then the Indians, became the first major league player ever to hit home runs from both sides of the plate in one inning. Just think about that for a second. 2 homers in an inning, but one left-handed, one right-handed. First guy ever to do that. So, Jeff, when I covered the Alexandria Dukes Class A minor league team in 1979, they had a third baseman named Gary Pellant, who became either the first or the second, we're still not clear on that, professional baseball player to hit 2 home runs in one inning, one left-handed and one right-handed. And Gary later became a scout for the Mariners. So after Baerga does this, I tracked down Gary Pellant. Not an easy thing to do back then, no cell phones, all that stuff. So I call him and I say, Gary, this is Tim Quirkjian with Sports Illustrated. He goes like this, I know why you're calling. So he relived that night at 4 Mile Run Park in Alexandria, Virginia, when he hit 2 home runs in one inning, one left-handed and one right-handed.
He was waiting for somebody to track him down.
He was waiting for this to finally happen in the major league level, and then he was hoping that someone would call him, and the guy who called him was the guy who was at the game right here. All right, last thing, Jeff, 1994 on this date, Kent Mercker pitched a no-hitter for the Braves at Dodger Stadium. Now, I was at SI at the time, so I'm just going all over the place, writing stories, seeing games, everything else. So I just happened to get lucky that Kent Mercker threw a no-hitter. So the next day I asked him, like, how did you celebrate? And he said, well, I just sat in my hotel room because back then, Jeff, CNN used to have something called CNN Headline News, and it would run like every 20 minutes. So it would run 3 times in an hour. And Kent Mercker said he like stayed up all night and watched the same clip every time that it came up on CNN Headline News because, you know, that's where you got some of your sports news back then. It was so good. And then years later, like 2 years ago, Kent Mercker told me the day after he pitched the no-hitter, Bobby Cox called him into his office. Bobby Cox, then the manager of the Braves, and he said, sorry, we're going to skip your next turn in the rotation. Because the Braves, of course, have the best rotation in baseball. They have all these future Hall of Famers. So Kent Mercker pitched a no-hitter. Then they skipped a start because they had pitchers better than him to start. And he just laughed out loud because he thought that was the greatest thing ever.
Let's move on to Team Tim this week. Dad, what do you have for us position by position?
Okay, so this week, Jeff, since one of the biggest home runs in Major League history was hit on this date, Hank Aaron's 715th, I decided to look at each position on the field and very subjectively, okay, come up with the greatest home run ever hit by each position on the field. So my catcher is Carlton Fisk, Game 6 of the 1975 World Series, where he was, please stay fair, that type of thing. I think I'm pretty safe with that one as far as catchers go, but almost all of these are debatable, including first base. So the first baseman I took was Freddie Freeman, whose grand slam in Game 1 of the World Series last year, a walk-off grand slam, the only walk-off grand slam in the history of the World Series, completely turned that series. If the Yankees win Game 1, as they should have, they might have won that series. Instead, Freddie Freeman hits a homer, changes the entire arc of the series. So that's my greatest one for a first baseman.
Not to mention, it continued his home run streak of consecutive World Series games with a home run. So, I mean, it twofold. Of course, the walk-off is the most important part, but it continued his personal streak of hitting a home run in a World Series game.
Right. And then, of course, the second baseman, no doubt, Bill Mazeroski, 1960 World Series, Game 7, hit a home run in the 9th inning off Ralph Terry to give the Pirates a 10-9 victory over the Yankees. The Yankees completely dominated, just blew out the Pirates in 3 of those games. but the Pirates won 4, including Game 7 with a home run by Bill Mazeroski. As I've told you before, Jeff, Game 7, the Mazeroski game, final score 10-9, 0 strikeouts in that game. In a World Series Game 7, our Game 7s these days, we have 20 strikeouts, if not more. That just shows you how much things have changed. Okay, third baseman is David Freese, 2011. He hit a walk-off homer in Game 6 against the Rangers to set up a Game 7. Cardinals win Game 7, and they win the World Series. So I think that's got to be the third baseman. You know, he was a local hero. He was a local kid, and he hit the double or hit the ball off the right field wall to help tie the game in the 9th inning, and then hit a walk-off home run in extra innings. So he's my third baseman. My shortstop is Bucky Dent, who, of course, hit the famous home run in the playoff game. It wasn't a postseason game. It was still a regular season game against the Red Sox in 1978. Remember, the Yankees were 14 games behind that season, caught the Red Sox at the end, and then beat them. And Bucky Dent had a 3-run homer off Mike Torres in order to really turn that game. It was a great game, one of the greatest games I've ever seen. And Bucky later came to play for the Texas Rangers when I covered them. And he told me that whole story that he used Mickey Rivers's bat to hit that home run. He said, I've never used it before. Mickey said, you should use his bat. So he had a home run using Mickey Rivers's bat. And poor Don Zimmer, the late Don Zimmer, one of my all-time heroes. He was the manager of the Red Sox, of course, in 1978. And years later, he rented Bucky Dent's house in New Jersey when Zim became a coach for the Yankees. So he's renting the guy's house who beat him in the 78 playoff with a 3-run homer in the 7th inning. And Zim told me right above the master bedroom where Zim is sleeping is a giant newspaper headline under glass that says "Sox dented." And he said, that's what I had to go to sleep under every night at that guy's house. That's what happens when baseball players rent each other's houses. Love it.
Incredible.
Okay, well, the outfielder, of course, Hank Aaron has to be number 1 because he hit number 715. We'll talk to Tom House about that in a minute. But there were so many more. Bobby Thompson, of course, 1951, 3-run homer, beat Ralph Branca and the Dodgers, shot heard round the world. The Giants win the pennant. That's one, of course. Roger Maris hit number 61 on the last day of the season to set the all-time single-season home run record, passing the great Babe Ruth. Of course, Hank Aaron passed him for career homers, but that day in New York, Roger Maris passed him for the most homers in a single season. And the last one is Joe Carter, 1993, hit a home run, walk-off homer in Game 6 off of Mitch Williams. And I know I've told you this story, Jeff, but I'm working for Sports Illustrated. I am in the auxiliary press box. And as soon as this ball, and this is beyond the left field fence, as soon as the ball is hit, I think, okay, the World Series is over. This is a home run. The second thing that I think is this ball is going to hit me right in the middle of the chest unless I move. The ball landed about 3 feet in front of me. Otherwise, it would have hit me right in the middle of the chest, which would have been the funniest thing. It would have killed me, but it would have been amazing. So those are my 3 outfielders. Now I'm going to test you a little here, Jeff. We have to have a pinch hitter on our team, even though it's not one of the actual positions. So who hit, I don't think there's an argument here, who hit the biggest pinch hit home run in baseball history?
It has to be Kirk Gibson, right?
Of course, 1988. Kirk Gibson was he was not going to play that night. And Bob Costas, one of the great broadcasters ever, says on the air, he says, there's no way that Kirk Gibson is going to play tonight. You know, that the injury he has, he can't even run. There's no way he's going to play. And Kirk Gibson was with Oral Hershiser in a little side room there. And he got so angry, even though what Bob Costas said was absolutely accurate. There was no chance he was going to play. Kirk Gibson said, I'm going to get in this game. I'm going to play in this game somehow. I don't care. So Oral Hershiser runs the message down to Tommy Lasorda that Gibby can give you an at-bat if you need it. And then, of course, he hit the home run off of Dennis Eckersley. That completely changed the series. I was there, Jeff. The A's were a dominant team. They were going to win that game. They were going to win the series. And the whole series flipped when Kirk Gibson hit that famous homer off of Dennis Eckersley. And the final one, Jeff, and I had a real trouble with this, so I'm going to leave this up to our listeners. What pitcher hit the biggest home run in Major League history? And I did very little research on this. Now, some people will tell you that Bartolo Colon's home run a few years ago, he had never hit a homer before. Chunky, he hits his home run in San Diego, and Gary Cohen said, it's one of the greatest home runs in baseball history, which it was. But I still have to have an importance to the game in order to make it the biggest home run. So I don't even know what the answer is, but I'm going with Game 7 of the 67 World Series, Cardinals and Red Sox. Bob Gibson, one of the great postseason pitchers ever, pitched a complete game in Game 7 and hit a home run in the 5th inning against Jim Lonborg, who was the Cy Young winner in the American League that year. So that's the best I can do. Anyone who's got a better one, I'm more than happy to listen.
Dad, I just did a quick Reddit search, okay? I know you don't know what Reddit is, but it's basically a forum where people can talk about stuff just like this. So I typed in, biggest home run by a pitcher in history. Some guy just wrote this. Atlanta, 1985, the 4th of July game, Rick Camp.
Yeah, Jeff, look, that's in the discussion for sure, okay? And remember, Jeff, that was the game that was delayed and delayed and delayed, and they finally finished at like 4 o'clock in the morning, 18-inning game. They shot off the fireworks at 4 o'clock in the morning, and Rick Camp was a pitcher and not a very good hitting pitcher, but he hit a home run to tie that game. And we're going to have Ron Darling and Keith Hernandez, I hope, on for our July 4th episode this year, just to talk exclusively about that game. That's how crazy that was. So yes, I considered Rick Camp. I considered Bartolo Colon. Some amazing things have happened from pitchers, but given the importance of the World Series, you're pitching Game 7 and you hit a home run to help you win the game. That's going to be my choice, even though, again, there are many, many others.
Let us know what position you think should be changed, what pitcher you would want, greatest home run by a pitcher, greatgameorwhat.com. You can let us know. And Dad, you mentioned it, of course, Hank Aaron hitting 715 on this day 51 years ago. And our guest, Tom House, was not only there, was not only Hank Aaron's teammate, he was the one that caught the ball, 715 home runs, and ran it into Hank Aaron, securing himself in history forever. And he's our guest today. It's coming up next here on Is This a Great Game or What?
Welcome back to Is This a Great Game or What? And our guest is my dear friend Tom House, former Major League pitcher, former pitching coach, a man who knows more about throwing a baseball and all objects than any person I've ever met, and the man who 51 years ago tonight caught Hank Aaron's 715th home run. Tom, this is Jeff Quirkjians. Say hello.
Jeff, nice meeting you, kiddo.
Tom, thank you so much for joining us. My dad has been so excited when an On This Date in Baseball meets up with a guest. His baseball mind is exploding right now, how special this interview is.
Yeah, awesome. But we're going to uncover some things that have never been said, too. Wait and see.
Yes. Well, Tom, before we get to Hank Aaron, I just wanted to I find this interesting because your son, Brian, is like the greatest surfer. He's the greatest snowboarder and the greatest skateboarder. And my son, who's remarkably talented, is the worst adult swimmer I've ever seen in my life. So you have a champion surfer, and I have a son who could barely get across the pool without falling down.
But we're all here talking about it. So the cool thing is, as long as you find something that you're passionate about, and a new word, ignition. Ignition with passion means that that's what he's going to do the rest of his life in some way, shape, or form. And my son is still doing that. He's sneaking up on 48 years old. And he was, at one time, he was in the top 100, like you said, surfer, snowboarder, skateboarder. Now he designs skateboard shoes. He's never worked a day in his life. He's
Wow.
been doing what he wants to do, what he loves to do his whole career.
Right.
What was your reaction when he went on tour with Tony Hawk? Do I have that right?
Yeah, good for you. Yeah, the backstory on that. He and Ben Grieve were together all the time. When we were in Texas together, Tim, he was Little Thunder and Ben Grieve was Big Thunder. I truly believe my son could have played in the big leagues, but he came to me his senior year in high school and he said, "Dad, I love you, but I don't love baseball like you do. I'm going to go on tour with Tony Hawk." I said, "Well, who the hell is Tony Hawk?" No clue. But it turns out that he palled around with one of the best skateboarders in the history of, and that was where his passion lied. And I at the time I was crushed, but as I look back, for him to have the courage to come to me and say that he loved me, but he loved what Tony Hawk did more, that shows me some character as an 18-year-old, which is hard to find.
Can you ride a skateboard?
I can, but not real good. And I knew something was weird about my son when he was 4 years old. We got him a bike with training wheels. He said, "I'm not getting on that until you take those wheels off." I said, "Brian, you've never ridden a bike in your life." He said, "I'm not." That's like, "Okay," I said, "You little blank. I took him off. He got on the bike and rode away. And 2 weeks later, he was standing on the handlebars coming down the hill by my house. So I knew that he was some kind of an adrenaline freak, and baseball was just too tame for him.
All right, Tom, let's pivot to 51 years ago tonight. You have told me this story. I can repeat it verbatim, but I'm not going to do it because I want you to tell us. Tell us about going into that night, the night that we knew Hank Aaron had a chance to hit number 715. Take us from the moment you got to the ballpark, what the plan was in case Hank went deep.
Okay, well, he was chasing it from the previous year. It was a big decision whether he was going to break the record in 73 or whether he would break it in 74. So leading into the off season, we knew that he didn't break it in 73 and that we were opening up in Cincinnati. And I think he hit a home run off of Jack Billingham. Anyway, do we keep playing and have him break the record in Cincinnati? Or do we get back and have it be a Monday night game against the Dodgers? And Henry, being Henry, said, "I'm going to play. And if I hit the home run in Cincinnati, it happens. If I don't, we'll take it to Atlanta." So when he didn't break the record in Cincinnati, the hype, which was at fever pitch, Atlanta at that time was just looking for something to be excited about. And this was it. This was an event that everybody was anticipating, good and bad. There were telegrams, murder threats, all that kind of stuff. But as a teammate, I was a low-end bullpen guy. And what we did out in the bullpen behind the fence in the left field area, we drew straws for territories. And a lot of people don't know this, but Henry would take me a bucket of balls and we'd go to Diamond 6 during spring training. And I would throw him sinkers and screwballs away because that was one pitch he had trouble with off a left-handed pitcher, was that riding fastball away and a screwball. And after doing that for 3 or 4 years, I realized whenever there was a mistake made away belt high, he usually hit it to left center. So do the math on this. When we drew straws and I had my choice of where to be, I took left center, which was right under the, think of it as money sign advertising credit cards from whatever bank it was. The only guy that was further towards center field than me was Buzz Capra, and that's because he had the least time of any of the bullpen people. So it was Buzz, myself, and then all the way down to the guys that had been around forever. Jack, I'm drawing a blank on his last name, because Henry pulled most of his home runs.
Right.
So first AB, nothing happened. The second AB, it turns out they're going to have to throw him a strike here, because I believe Dusty and Ralph were on base. So we got our positions, and I said, I know he's going to hit this ball. and I think it was on a 2-1 or a 3-1 count. Bang! Here comes the ball, and I remember thinking that ball is coming to me, and it wasn't an oh crap, can I catch it? What am I going to do with it? If I would have stood still, it would have hit me right in the forehead. So all the stuff that I'd done watching throwing BP against him, it was happening in real time. And I remember catching the ball, and a big fish net went right after that. Some smart guy from Georgia Tech had an extension from up on a fish net, and that's when Buckner was playing left field with the Dodgers at that time. And Bill jumped to the top. He said, "Give it to me, give it to me." And I said, "I'm not throwing anything to you," and I just took off towards home plate. Well, if I would have thrown it to him, he probably would have missed that one like he did when he was with the Red Sox. So whenever I see him at whatever a get-together, I'll bring that up. But anyway, I ran it in. I do not remember how I got into home plate, but I kind of broke through the crowd and came up. And the picture that is in the Hall of Fame, and by the way, Jeff, that catch got me in the Hall of Fame. Not because I was a pitcher, but because I was part of a guy that was a Hall of Famer. Anyway, I got right up front. The ball was right in front of his mom's face. He was hugging his mom, and they both had tears in their eyes. And I got to thinking, boy, this is a lifesaver moment, one of those things that a mom and a son, you can't take away from. I didn't realize that she was hanging on to him to keep him from getting shot. They had to hit her off of him. When it came time to break up from that crowd, first of all, I held the ball up. I said, "Here it is, Hank." And he took it from me and said, "Thanks, kid." And I kind of got pushed away. But when it was time to break up and start getting back to playing ball, they had to peel her off of him because she was not going to let anybody shoot her son. That, in retrospect, would a lot of people don't know that, but how impactful is that? Not only for what he did, but what about a parent and the love for their kid? So there it was right there. That was cool.
Tom, the hate mail, the racist remarks. I mean, it's awful. And you heard all this, correct?
I did. And coming from California and not having the same issues with race that a lot of people did, it was hard for me to understand. Dusty Baker was my roommate in the minor leagues. Dusty was my roommate down in winter ball. I didn't really have the same issue. So it was strange to me. But the thing that is amazing in retrospect is that you would never know what Henry was going through. When he came to the ballpark, he was Mr. Regular, quietly, probably the most quietly competent superstar I've ever seen in my life. You didn't even know Henry was around until that moment when he did something special, which was really, really awesome. So, and when I look back over those times, the race itself, the fact that he had to check into hotels under different names, he couldn't ride the bus with the team. He had a full-time bodyguard, Calvin. It was a little bit difficult for me to comprehend, but that was the beginning of the stuff you see in today's world.
Oh.
Boy, that is heartbreaking. I know all about this, Tom, but to hear it from somebody who was there is, oh my goodness.
We had, last year I went back because it was the 50th anniversary, and there were 13 of us from that team in 1974. And the one thing that was consistent when we were telling stories and talking through things was how patient of a person Henry was and how he was so quietly a stud. You wouldn't even know that Henry was on the bench until he'd say, "Get me to the plate, guys. This game is over." Or he'll come. It was just to watch him day in and day out was something special.
Tom, the highlight of my career, my entire career, was about 7 years ago. We did a game from the booth in Atlanta. Dave Fleming, Eduardo Perez, myself, and Hank Aaron sat next to us for 4 innings. We got an hour and a half sitting next to Hank Aaron calling a game. I stopped keeping score, Tom, because I didn't care about the game anymore. I was so mesmerized sitting next to Hank Aaron. He was so funny. He was so charming. His recall was unbelievable.
Yeah.
And at the end, I looked at Twitter Never a good idea, Tom, to look at Twitter after you've called a major league game. But some guy wrote in and he said, if anyone ever looks at you the way that Tim Kirkjian looked at Hank Aaron tonight, you should marry that person.
I know.
That's how captivated I was with Hank Aaron.
But you get it. You've been around the game long enough. There's a difference between those superstars and everybody else. And then amongst that group of superstars, there's another level. And Henry was at that level. He was quiet. He didn't say much, but when he did, you could hang your hat on him. Right. And I learned a lot from Henry, a lot just by hanging out and watching him. And then because of catching his home run, Henry Aaron and his bubble were always really user-friendly for me. I never called and asked him for anything for myself, but when I could line something up that Henry could shorten the trail with, he never let me down with helping other people out. But a lot of people don't know that. Because he was quiet, everybody thought he was, kind of reserved and non-committal. He was quiet because if he didn't have something good to say, he never said anything.
Yeah, Tom, that was 51 years ago, and obviously a massive moment, not only in your baseball life, but in your entire life. But you've made a life surrounding the game that we all love. You embody, is this a great game or what? And that's why you're the perfect guest to join my dad and I. And your knowledge and love for pitching, in fact, like Nolan Ryan has spoken of your ability as a pitching coach and a pitching brain. You were throwing footballs in the outfield 40 years ago. Now we see that all the time. But take us to your love of pitching and your mindset behind the game in that way, because this has been your whole life.
Yeah, I firmly believe that it's hard to be a superstar and a good coach. You could be an information resource, but to be a grunt and grind it coach, someone that gets enjoyment from it, not only with working with kids, but elite athletes, you have to be a student of the game. One thing about being a marginal, and I'm not going to lie, I was marginal to horseshit my whole career. But consistently, I think Don Zimmer said it best. He said, Tommy House, you're marginal to horseshit, but you're predictably marginal to horseshit. So they knew if they plugged me into X amount of games. So I had to figure out, because I was short on physical tools, I had to be a little sharper, a little bit more understanding between my ears. And I think that led me to the why of the game. There's a whole lot of people, and maybe later on in this get-together, Tim, we can talk about how smart baseball is right now technology-wise. But you still have to take that really, really good objective information and teach from it. I think that's what I was best at. And it was because I was mentored along the way, starting from the San Diego School of Baseball with Roger Craig, with Bob Cluck, way back when I had little leaguers from 1968 to 1971. They gave me little leaguers to work with. That's still my favorite group. Little leaguers, 12-year-olds and under, they say it like it is. If you can't teach them something, they click you off, they ignore you. If you can hold, now you're laughing, but if you can entertain a group of 12-year-olds, you can teach any big leaguer anything. Right. So being able to do that early and finding out I really enjoyed doing that, it wasn't like playing, but it was pretty close. And then I had a mom, and Tim, I'm sure you've heard this. Jeff, I'm not sure you have. My mom had a rule for my brother and myself. If we didn't get an A, we couldn't play sports. No A, no play. Because she knew that an education was important, and that's really all she cared about. She could not understand how anybody could play and make a living playing. In fact, on her deathbed, she said, now, Thomas, when are you going to find real work? So she never really understand that you could make a living being a coach too. But that, I think, that avid learning, that challenge, the why to go with the what. There were lots of coaches, lots of baseball people, even today, that can tell you what to do, but they can't tell you why. If there's anything that myself and the people that I work with do, we can give you the why better than anybody in the world.
Let's go back to the footballs for just a second, Jeff. I've never seen any baseball player throw a football until Tom came to the Rangers as the pitching coach in 1985. And again, I covered a game at Yankee Stadium last Saturday, and virtually every pitcher on the field was still throwing a football 40 years later. Tom might remember that I asked Charlie Huff, hilarious pitcher for the Rangers and the best pitcher on the Rangers. I asked him during that 85 season, I said, Charlie, are the footballs helping? And he goes, I don't know, but we lead the league in third down conversions, which that's how some people looked at it. But Tom, they're still doing it. They are using your method from 40 years ago, and it still works today. Explain that, please.
It's a cross, but now we know the vocabulary to go with it. I knew back then that all my best pitchers could make the ball spin. They could make it spiral. The guys that couldn't spiral a football they couldn't recover on time, and they were usually stiff and sore. So we learned early on that throwing a football actually helped their recovery. We also knew that the good ones, you can't throw a football wrong and make it spiral. So it was cross-specific to the throwing of a baseball. And now we know, because of the high-speed video, that when you start to throw, it's a breaking ball. When the ball is just about ready to leave your hand, it's a fastball. And as the ball leaves your hand, your arm pronates like a changeup. So with every throw of a football, if you can make it spiral, you know the timing of your mechanics and your breaking ball, fastball, changeup are all equally efficient in the throw. So that it just reinforces. We didn't know it at the time. And unfortunately, or fortunately, the kids started punting it, and the Mitch Williams and the Jeff Russells probably could have kicked in the NFL by the time they finished with the Rangers, because they were out there at 3:00 in the afternoon seeing if they could kick it out of the stadium. So that was one of the issues. But the football, even today, is one of the best cross trainers that are out there. Paul Skeens, he can throw a football as good as any NFL quarterback I've ever worked with.
And Tom, you've worked with a lot of NFL quarterbacks. Tell us about that.
Well, the only difference between pitching and quarterbacking is quarterbacks are on flat ground throwing a heavier ball with a shorter stride. Everything else is the same. The timing, the kinematic sequencing, the mechanical variables, balance and posture, all those things we work on are exactly the same for a quarterback as it is for a pitcher.
I want to talk a little bit about today's game and ask you, why now do we feel like pitchers, first of all, they're pitching for less time, starters especially, obviously, but why are pitchers always getting hurt, Tom? I worry about this. I feel like all the big stars, half of them are out for a season, it seems, getting surgery.
All right, well, number one, they're not afraid of Tommy Johns anymore. It's like a knee surgery. It's also a way for an organization to have control of a pitcher for an extra 2 years. So there's all kinds of dynamics, but as long as you ask, and if I get boring, stop me. There's 4 things that keep an arm healthy. It's your workload, it's your pitch totals, it's your mechanical efficiency, it's your functional strength, and it's your ability to recover. If kids from Little League actually prepared themselves properly, they could adapt to whatever you're asking out of a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. But they don't. In today's world, kids pitch too much. They don't throw enough. That's an important thing. They don't throw enough. They're geared toward the gun. When a pitcher throws starting in Little League, they're looking at the gun for absolute velocity, little realizing that you have to pitch. Even in the big leagues today, with a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, you do have to pitch a little bit. So, but the body will adjust to workloads if you train accordingly. Now, I'm not going to go too deep, but when you train, there's 3 muscle groups that accelerate the arm and 2 muscle groups that decelerate the arm. On the bottom half, there's 4 muscle groups that accelerate your legs and 3 muscle groups that decelerate your legs. We are designed to go forward on flat ground. We're designed to throw rocks at rabbits on flat ground. When you get to a mound, you have to go down a hill. And going down the hill actually helps the acceleration muscles, but the deceleration muscles aren't asked to balance off. So if you look at the evaluation and all the information that's out there right now, you're only as strong as your weakest link, and you can only accelerate what you can decelerate. When people come to anybody that I'm responsible for, we work harder on the backside muscles, the decelerators in both upper body and lower body than we do the front side, because you can't accelerate unless you can decelerate. If your brakes can't stop a 200-mile-an-hour Ferrari, you're going to have a wreck. The reason that kids get hurt on the mound, they're not trained to adapt. Can I do a little sidebar real
Yes,
quick here?
please.
If you can remember, Nolan Ryan was probably the first person that made me aware that long toss, he called it hit the hat drill. Long toss to him was as far as you could throw perfectly. And the only day you didn't long toss was the day you were competing. So he would throw as much on flat ground at distance as he did on the mound with a baseball. So that was one of the reasons he was so good for so long, is he had balanced strength from the beginning to the end. And not only was he a great baseball player, he could stuff a basketball behind his head with either hand. So he played all sports. The fact that he didn't specialize, the fact that he played basketball, and the fact that he threw a lot in high school and early pro career was the reason his arm set up to be able to throw as many pitches as he did. Right. There aren't too many people in the game today that could. I'm going to tell a Bobby Valentine story. Bobby went out to take him out of a game, and Bobby said, "That'll be it, Tex." And Nolan said, "No, it won't, Bob. I was leaving this here mound, and it ain't going to be me." So he, unless he gave 6+ innings, he was not going to come out of the game. So it's a mindset. Now you start getting third time through the order, and even the best starters are expecting to have a relief pitcher pick them up. So there's a lot going on, but it's going to take a commitment from everybody. Insurance companies that underwrite these $1 million contracts, front offices that allow for an individual to train to handle their workloads, and then making sure that when someone isn't recovering properly, all the money right now, Tim, is being spent on recovery. Why do some people recover quicker than others? For example, we were doing thermographic imaging when you and I were with the Rangers. We were looking at, with this guy, Dr. John Vladdy, we were looking at how the arm recovered from various workloads. And so managing recovery with nutrition, sleep, cold therapy, oxygen chambers, all that kind of stuff is a plus also. The pitchers that can recover to handle their workloads every fifth day are the ones that don't get hurt.
Nolan threw out the first ball of the game. I'm sure you know the story, when he was like 62 years old. Typical Nolan, he got loose underneath the stadium. Oh, yeah. Because there's no way that the greatest power pitcher of all time is going to go out there and just lob something to the plate. So he goes to the top of the rubber. He throws out the first ball. Jim Sundberg, Gold Glove catcher like 8 times, is his catcher. And Nolan lets it go, and they had a gun on him. And he threw it like 85 miles an hour.
Yeah, it was 85 miles an hour. Yeah.
Right. And Sonny, who was a great catcher, realized, oh, no, he has to bend down to catch this pitch. And he split his pants right there on the field. And he said, I should have known better that Tex was going to throw as hard as I can. That story doesn't surprise you at all. Agreed?
No, true story. Yeah. I still think, he's my age. We're both 78. I'll guarantee you he could get up on the mound and get it to home plate in right around 80 miles an hour. Because he threw hard, easy. He had very little stress on his arm because his legs and his torso were so strong.
Tom, if he pitched today, would he be better, not as good, way better, way worse? How would he pitch today in recognizing that our hitters are up there with one thing in mind? Hit it as hard as they can, as far as they can, Would he be even better today?
Yes, he would, because he had 3 pitches and he had command of them. Now, he didn't get command of the changeup until he joined the Rangers when we made it a must-throw pitch. But if there's a video out there, or there's a documentary out there called Fastball, where they actually talk about who were the hardest throwers in the history of. That may or may not be the right title, but they have him in Angel Stadium, and they finally got capture of one of his fastballs on pitch number 104, and it was 108 miles an hour on their gun. All right, so if that translated into today's technology, where it's really true technology, he's a guy that would probably sit 104, 105 and show 108, and he could give it to you all day long.
Jeff, think about that for a second. And this was 25 years ago, 30, 40 years ago, he was throwing 104 miles an hour.
Jeff, we know the human arm can go 118 miles an hour. I've actually had 15 or 20 kids with a 2-ounce ball throw it 118 miles an hour. We know the arm can go that fast. Wow. Can it go that fast with a 5-ounce for any number of pitches? We don't know yet. But the most amazing thing to me is the hitters are adjusting to 100-mile-an-hour fastball. When I first got to the big leagues, they didn't have guns. When guns came to Atlanta, Paul Casanova threw the ball back to me as a catcher harder than I threw it to him. So I asked, I told the guys up front, I said, don't put my velo up on the board, because Casanova throws it back faster. I don't want the world to know that. But the bottom line is, think about this, Tim. You hit. I know you were a contact hitter when you played. There's no way, if you just time a regular swing, a regular big league swing, and you put the timing together, there's no way a kid should be able to catch up with a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. But what are they doing? They actually have figured out a way. So I believe that for that reason, baseball is unique. The hitter-pitcher interface doesn't exist anywhere else. And it's hard for a non-technician to understand that ballet, that orchestration that's happening. But think about this. Not only are pitchers, Tim, the average velocity when I got to the big leagues of a major league pitcher was right at 86.5 miles an hour. Now the average velocity in the big leagues is 92.5. Think about that. So eventually, I can't see how the human arm can handle more than 118, but I'm not going to discount it. It may happen one of these days.
I'm told all the time, and I'm not disputing it, that the stuff we see in the big leagues, we've never seen anything quite like it. Velocity like this, guys that can spin it like this, sliders, changeups, everything. It's unbelievable. Do you agree that this is the period of the greatest stuff that we've ever seen?
Yeah, I was pretty proud of my generation. I thought we were very skilled as a profession, pitchers, quote, quote. But the talent that is run out on mounds today, there's 4 or 5 guys on every staff that can throw 100 miles an hour. And because we can actually monitor spin rate and how it comes off a middle finger, the mechanics haven't changed, Tim. The things that we were figuring out with three-dimensional motion analysis in the 80s, those rules still hold up. But what to do with those rules and how to make an arm go faster and a spin rate increase, because they can actually, they film a release point and they can look at grip, and they can ideally say you need to have this position with your wrist and your forearm to make the fingers, your middle finger, do this on the seam, and the ball has to be this axis in your hand. Well, we had to do it just by guessing, by golly. I figured out how to make my pitch move a little bit more with the grip and a little sandpaper or clay on the seam. These guys know how to do it by just how their hand configures on the ball, and that's basically technology telling them what to do.
Jeff, when I was 26 years old, I asked Tom House to show me how to scuff a baseball, And he did. Then I asked him to put some moisture on it and show me how, if you want to, you can throw a spitball. Then I asked him to put some sandpaper and show me what that does. So this is what pitchers of your era knew, Tom. When they got a scuffed baseball, they were thrilled. Now we see a guy throw a scuffed baseball out of the game. Am I right about this?
No, you're exactly right. And people don't realize it takes more talent to know how to cheat a little bit than it does to actually not cheat. So you guys are laughing, and they left guys like me alone. If Nolan or one of the hard throwers from his generation were loading the ball up or cheating, they'd be run out of the game. But when you needed to survive, like I did, as long as you didn't abuse it, they left you alone. Because the umpires in those generation, they realized how difficult it is to master a pitch that has a little fuzz on it or whatever. It's drag crisis. You got to put the scuff the opposite way you want the ball to go. When you've got dirt in your seam, like will happen in the best stadium in the world for clay in a seam was Dodger Stadium. They still have the best mounds out there. You put a little clay in a seam and you put it right underneath your middle finger. You throw a breaking ball. It's like one of those golf balls that have a weight in it. It flops. That's exactly what happens out of your hand. So we didn't understand the laws of physics like I do now, but we knew that if you did this, then this was going to be your result. And mastering that pitch was just as difficult as mastering a sinker, a cutter, a slider. In today's game, they're manipulating at high arm speed at release. They're basically twisting their wrist to put more, in effect, drag crisis on the ball out of their hand, specific to their delivery, their arm slot, and where the baseball goes with critical mass. It's a gift. And the kids that are managing these new pitches, they call them the sweeper or the cutter or whatever the shape they want to call it. They're actually learning how to do that by watching what the finger does on the ball at release point. And the technology that's out there today can actually show it.
That's fascinating. It's so fascinating that this game has been around for so long and how much it can change, but at the same time, how much can stay the same in such a beautiful way. And that's what makes this game so great.
There's the carryover. You and your dad can go to a game and watch it through the same eyes, and for different reasons, walk away from that game with the same feeling.
Right.
The statistics of the game, I think, are what makes the carryover work. And I can remember Satchell Paige. Can I do a little sidebar story here real quick?
Of course.
I got to pitch with Satchell Paige his last 6 weeks in professional baseball when he was 62 years old. Now, there's a backstory here. Satchell needed 42 days to qualify for Major League pension. I don't know if you realize, as a rookie with Cleveland, he got to the big leagues at 42 years old and got 3 years and whatever amount of days, but 42 days short of his 4 years to qualify for the pension. So the Braves were scuffling for attendance, and they told Satchell, look, we'll send you to Richmond, Virginia, their AAA team, for a couple weeks before we come through to play an exhibition game. And if you show you can throw strikes and get somebody out, we'll bring you back to Atlanta with us, and we'll put you on, when the roster's expanded in September, we'll put you on the roster and you get your time in and do a little pitching for the big league team. Well, I got to sit right next to Satchell Paige and watch his act where he'd cover the plate up and put a gum wrapper down, and he'd throw over the gum wrapper, and the catcher never had to move his glove. I mean, it sounds like you're telling stories, but he was as accurate as Greg Maddux and putting on a show. And after every pitch, he would throw and go, what do you think every pitcher on the Richmond staff was doing after they'd throw and go, just like he did, copying him. So to speed the story up, he starts the game against Atlanta. First hitter in Atlanta is Ralph Garr. Hits a line drive off of Satchell's left knee. It bounced in the dugout on a fly. Satchell got himself up, dusted himself off, walked from the mound to the dugout, dugout to the clubhouse to his pink Cadillac, and drove off into the night. We never saw him again. That was it.
Tom, he had command at 62, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Elite
And
command.
I swear, I'm not exaggerating this right now. I honestly believe that some of these guys, I think Greg Maddux would have been able to throw just as good at 60 as he did at 40 or 35, because we kind of proved it with Tom Brady and Drew Brees. We actually proved it with Jamie Moyer. We can create a body with the technology and the smarts that are out there with science. There's no reason at all that someone at age 45 can't do what he did at 25 if he's willing to pay the price. And the price is a commitment to what Brady does: nutrition, sleep, the whole 9 yards. There's no reason that they couldn't come close to competing. Now, covering first base, what did Charlie have? Charlie threw when he was at least 47, 48.
Yeah, 47. Charlie pitched till he was 47.
Yeah, and Hoyt Wilhelm was till he was 51, I think.
Yeah.
So, but it's not being able to throw strikes; it's being able to protect yourself with a line drive back at your body. So that's what they go home for. It's not that they can't pitch; it's they can't protect themselves or play or field their position.
All right, Tom, the news story, and we're going to leave you alone here in a minute. The biggest story of the baseball season so far has been the torpedo bat. And you sent me a little video of tell me what you sent. Tell everyone what you sent me about the torpedo bat.
Well, this is a little pat on the back to the really smart people I was working with in the 80s when we were with the Texas Rangers, and the fact that Bobby Valentine and Tom Grieve allowed me to go out and find these crazies that were doing stuff. So Jack McKay was the research guy for Louisville Slugger, and he had a laboratory in Mount Pleasant, Texas, about 45 minutes outside the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And we would go out and we would just experiment with stuff. Knob loading, moving the critical mass of the bat, center of gravity, what bat works better, cupped, whatever it might be. And at that time, Tom Grieve was the general manager of the Rangers, and his son eventually became the first round draft choice for the Oakland A's. And Jack would make bats based on their swing to fit their profile. Wow. And he actually made a torpedo bat. Didn't even know what it was, but he made a torpedo bat because he looked at where most of Ben's contact was, and that's where he put the critical mass of the bat. So it wasn't wasted up toward the top or toward the knob. And so Ben had a pretty good career. I think he played in the big leagues for 8 or 9 years. And so you saw he still had one of the bats, and it's a torpedo bat. And these really smart kids in the technology end right now, out of the Ivy League schools and these motion labs, they're just kind of rebuilding the wheel. We just didn't know how to market it properly. It was an individual thing. Basically, if you had a Louisville Slugger, Jack would create a bat to fit your swing. That's personally adapt yourself. That's kind of what we do with the mound and hitting now.
Wow.
Jeff,
It's
a torpedo
unbelievable.
bat 25 years ago. We all thought it was invented this week.
Yeah,
It's insane.
Basically because of social media, it is invented this week. But even with the data that we've created, I've got about 1,200 major league pitchers in the computer at 1,000 frames a second. And we're not really learning a whole lot new about the delivery. We're learning more and more about how to teach from that delivery.
Tom, I have to ask you, and this will be my last question for you, about having one of my favorite actors of all time, Bill Paxton, play you in the movie $1 Million Arm, which, by the way, loved the movie. How cool was that, kind of having a flash of Hollywood in your life?
Well, it was really easy because off camera with your dad, I was saying Bill Paxton was a consummate professional. He followed me around for 3.5, 4 weeks just to pick up mannerisms and vocabulary. And it is kind of funny, but my wife says Bill Paxton does a better Tom House than Tom House does. So that was the lead in there. But that movie it actually played like it happened. They did a really good job. 2 kids from India that won a reality show over there, won the right to come and spend the summer with me to see if we could get them to throw it hard enough and consistent enough to sign with a major league team. So both the kids were with me that whole summer, and at the end of the summer, they signed with the Pittsburgh Pirates. Rinku, the left-hander, actually pitched until right into AAA ball. After, I think, 6 years, he retired. Dinesh went home after 3 to Mumbai and is a pitching coach there. He's the best pitching coach in India at this time. He's the only pitching coach in India. But we still have a reach when it comes to baseball in India. And that whole premise, these kids couldn't play catch. The first day, they thought that the glove you put the glove on your throwing hand to keep it warm. So they went from that to be able to. They signed with Pittsburgh later that summer, and all the peaks and valleys and everything they did that summer, they came across in the movie. They did a great job. Disney did a really good job in that movie.
Tom, this has been delightful. We could keep you for hours and hours, but I have to go ride my skateboard now, so I have to go leave for a minute. Jeff, this is like 40 years ago when I met Tom House for the first time. I didn't understand half of the words he said because his intelligence level was 1,000 times above mine.
Tom, you have been so informative, so fascinating, from the times with Hank Aaron to now the technicalities of this game, starting all the way from 12-year-old kids. I was a Little League umpire for many, many years. I love youth baseball, and I thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Let's not wait 5 years to do something like this again. Is that a promise from you guys?
That's a promise, Tom. Thanks so much.
What a fantastic interview with Tom House. Everything from torpedo bats to pitcher injuries to Satchell Paige and, of course, Hank Aaron. Just an incredible interview. I had a blast chatting with him. Dad, thank you for putting that together. That was fantastic.
Yeah, it was great. So, Jeff, last story on Hank Aaron. He plays an old-timers game in Texas, 30 years ago or so, and I was there. So he's being interviewed on the field by some radio guy, and the radio guy says, okay, Hank, tell us all about that famous 755th home run that you hit. So Hank, who's the nicest man in the world, 755 was the last home run he hit. So Hank looks at the guy, and Hank is such a charming, nice man. And he goes, well, most people want to ask me about 715, but if you want to talk about 755, I'd be happy to talk that. So he detailed everything about the final home run of his major league career, what I'm sure the radio guy meant to say 715.
Just got a little bit nervous when talking to Hank Aaron.
Who wouldn't? Even Aaron Boone got nervous talking to Hank Aaron.
Friday, brand new episode for you. We're going to be in person together all weekend, and then a very special in-person guest for next Tuesday. And I'll just say, he's a big baseball fan, but he also loves basketball a whole lot and made his entire life and career surrounding college basketball. Cannot wait to bring this guest in person next week. Dad, we'll chat more on Friday. And for everybody listening, thank you for being a part of our family.